and welcome to this week's episode of QTV. Wow, hope we've got a fantastic program for you this evening.
We'll be talking to Yamatji and Noongar man Mark Nannup, the first Indigenous Engagement Officer for the Midsumma Festival.
We continue our Glimpses into Asia series, visiting Tokyo for all the fun and excitement of their annual Pride March.
Youth Affairs Council Officer Thomas Feng talks about funding opportunities for Q+ youth.
And our Moments in Time series remembers OutRage, one of the great Q+ magazines from the past.
My name is Mark Nannup. I am Yamatji and Noongar. Yamatji is on my father's side and Noongar is on my mother's side, and I am from Western Australia. I grew up in between Meekatharra and Port Hedland. Port Hedland was where all the work is, and Meekatharra is where all my family is. I guess we stretch from Port Hedland, Meekatharra, Geraldton and Perth. Where I'm from, law and language, law, which is LORE, still happens. You go out for a month or whatnot and you go through the initiation process out in the bush. I haven't been through, and I mean, I've got uncles who said if I wanted to go through I could, but yeah, it's different for me. People often ask me where the blonde hair and blue eyes come from, and it came from, I guess, colonization. My great-great-grandfather was the 11th Premier of Western Australia, and he had a child out of wedlock. I traced it back to Sir Henry's father, who was a part of the first fleet to come over. And then when you got a little light blonde-haired, blue-eyed kid running around the farm, I guess you could can't really deny that somebody's gotten up to stuff. And so that's Sir Henry Bruce Lefroy, the 11th Premier of Western Australia. Then that was his son, and then that's his son, and that's me. People are quick to say, oh, you're Aboriginal, but what else? And so yeah, I have to constantly tell that story. I guess I just have features that don't perpetuate a stereotype of what an Aboriginal looks like. Because I think a lot of people's ideas of what an Aboriginal looks like is dark skin, brown eyes, pre-colonial textbook that everyone's taught, not the modern day version of what an Aboriginal looks like because of colonization. It's my adopted father's last name. We're biologically related, but very long distance. I think it's not until I had reached year 8 and 9 I started questioning why I didn't really look like anyone else in the family. Like, my adopted father always took me around to see my biological family, but I didn't register that they were my biological family. I also found out that I was the middle child amongst his 5 daughters he had already had. So yeah, I guess he kind of explained that one. And then upon meeting all my biological family, I also found out that I'm the oldest out of all the boys in the entire family. And in my adopted family, I'm the middle child, and everyone kind of just glosses over you. And then to go into a family where you're the oldest and everyone respects your opinion and listens to what you have to say was a bit weird to get a grasp on, because yeah, when you're the oldest, things change. I was in my second year apprenticeship of boiler making and I was 18 and living in Karratha, and so I came down for my brother's 21st. We got drunk and everything. We were just having so many like deep and meaningful, and everyone was happy and jolly, and then it just came out. Everyone thankfully supported me. I had met other Aboriginal people in Perth. They came out and they were disowned because they didn't want the parents didn't want their last name tarnished. I used to go to school almost every day and think about how I was going to end my life because of the amount of bullying and torment, because I didn't really fit in. I remember hanging off the edge of the 2-story building, telling myself not to let go, whilst kids at the bottom were telling me to let go. Suicide played on my mind a lot from many years after that. And it's weird because you think it will stop, and it doesn't, until you really take control of where you want to go in life. And then once I did, it stopped. I had lots of struggle with self-identity within the gay community. There were periods where racism was very evident, and so I would be like, oh, I'm just part Aboriginal, I'm not fully or anything. And I look back now, I'm just like, oh my God, how dare you make me feel less about myself. I did feel extremely pressured to do drugs. It was just really bizarre for me because coming from an Aboriginal community who was portrayed in a certain way, coming into the gay community, seeing the drugs be just as bad, but it not being broadcasted on TV. BCA have an Indigenous department, which is, I'm in there like every day, because it's just being around your own people that keep you going. Yeah, I keep grounded by hanging around my own people. I know for the most part, I'm usually the only Aboriginal person in a room. I noticed the Mardi Gras that was happening in St Kilda wasn't like Sydney's. I just got sick of watching it. And so I just rang them up. I was like, Midsumma, how come you guys don't have an Aboriginal float? And they were like, would you like to do it? And I was like, yes, please. Yeah, that's when I became Midsumma's first ever Indigenous Engagement Coordinator. And now it's a position that's within the festival. When I was working in mining and construction, I was making so much money. And I felt like shit all the time. And now I do so much community work and I have no money, but I am so happy.
Coming up now, we've got all the fun and excitement and colour of the Tokyo Pride March.
25 years after the Stonewall riot in America, the first Pride Parade in Japan was held in Tokyo in 1994. The first year, 1,000 people marched from Shinjuku Central Park to Shibuya Miyashita Park. Shinjuku is the area in Tokyo famous for gay bars. The theme of Tokyo Rainbow Pride 2019 is I Have Pride. Here are the local council members marching. All the major political parties gave their support and many marched. Calling for marriage equality. Family and friends supporting. calling for LGBT information in schools. Rainbow Reel organized the annual Lesbian and Gay Film Festival. Pride Eagle Tokyo, a major business running bars and party wear shops. This year, there are many prominent sponsors. MUFG is one of the major banks in Japan. Solicitors calling for partnership recognition. Japan, a Q Plus News website. Playing the traditional Japanese musical instrument, shamisen.
Youth Affairs Council Officer Thomas Feng talks about funding opportunities for Q Plus Youth.
Then we'll remember that great magazine, OutRage.
Tell us a little bit about what YACVIC does, the Youth Affairs Council of Victoria.
So YACVIC, we're the peak body for young people and workers who support young people in Victoria. We're part of a network of peak bodies across the whole country. Essentially what a peak body means is that we represent young people, we do political advocacy for them, we also, build the capacity of the sector to train workers, to be, to incorporate best use practice, to incorporate ethical practice as well into their work. And we're also there to make sure that, marginalised and vulnerable young people are represented on a broader level. So we have key services such as the Youth Disability Advocacy Services, which is all about one-on-one direct advocacy with disabled young people. We've got a rural arm as well. And we also auspice the Career Youth Council and Vic SRC, which is focusing on Aboriginal young people and school-age students as well.
So you've got a series of grants coming up for the GLBTIQ community. What do you see as the gaps there in terms of being able to fund or get funding for GLBTIQ groups?
There's so much out there. I think the Hay grants traditionally have been known to support issues and communities which traditionally wouldn't have funding to do these kinds of things. So rural and regional communities have traditionally been a really strong part of that. So, for example, this year, Swan Hill ran their first ever Pride Cup featuring the Naya Football Club and the Swan Hill Football Club and the Netball Club as well. And to have that kind of event in a really conservative community of about 10,000 people is life-changing for a lot of young people to see that communities are getting out there to support them. It also supports community radio stations. So Joy and Sin have previously been recipients as well to train LGBTIQ plus young people in being more active on radio, to produce, to present and to do all those kinds of things, and schools as well. I think traditionally as well, when there's been national debate around LGBTIQ plus issues, so marriage equality, Hay grants have been there to support there as well. So with the upcoming Religious Discrimination Act coming through, I think there may be some focuses there too.
So these grants in particular focus on mental health promotion and community engagement activities. Can you tease that out a little bit?
Yeah, so there's two sort of categories. There's a social connectedness category, which is all around community awareness and getting young people and the broader community to interact. And there's also a youth-led community, a youth-led category. So what those end up looking like, it's very diverse. So we've had places like the Peter Mac Victorian Adolescent and Young Adult Cancer Centre do present a resource which is all about helping young LGBTIQ plus people going through cancer with their hospital experience and making sure that they're visible and that they're heard and that they're listened to in hospital. We've also had in the youth-led category last year, the City of Knox Council, they worked with a Momentum Studios on a short film called Masked, which is all about a young trans man, Zoe, who was struggling with their identity and struggling with, I guess, finding a supportive environment and struggling with, how do I come out as a trans man? And it actually comes out as a really reaffirming piece. And I definitely recommend everyone to check it out as well.
The Hay grants have been going for just about 9 years, haven't they?
Yeah, and I think
70 or so grants, which is pretty significant.
It's pretty significant, and about 100,000 at least every year. And a couple of years ago with the same-sex marriage survey, an additional 50,000 in that year as well. I think we're trying to do more to make sure that the name of the Hay grants is out there. Next year will be 10 years, and we're really hoping that anyone who's been supported by a Hay grant previously, lets us know.
Together, yeah.
Exactly. We hope to really push that profile.
And Thomas, do you have any sort of a handle on, you talked briefly before about, a lot of the time, a lot of the successful applications are regional. In terms of the breakup over the last few years, what has been the breakup in terms of regional versus metropolitan?
And it's probably about 50-50 at this point.
Because this has a focus, a particular focus on young people experiencing discrimination and abuse, and it has a focus on some good mental health outcomes. I think it's an incredible initiative. Coming up for its 10th year, for some of these, well, for anyone, a grant of, potentially $10,000 to do some work, to do a piece of work, is really important. And it's not just for them to do it, it's actually recognition that their idea is valid and, that their concerns need to be addressed.
I couldn't agree more. And when you empower a young person, when you make them feel welcome and included and that their ideas are heard and valued and potentially brought into reality, that's going to change a group of young people's lives.
Almost as soon as gay and lesbian people started organising themselves and coming out politically, they started to produce publications. newsletters, newspapers, magazines. One of the most important of these was OutRage, which was set up in Melbourne in 1983 and lasted through to 2000. It was produced for most of its history here in King William Street in Fitzroy. The appearance of OutRage at the time when the AIDS epidemic was taking off made it particularly important, particularly through the journalism of Adam Carr. The magazine played a vital role in educating and informing Australian gay men, who were the biggest at-risk group here in Australia, about the social, political and medical consequences of the disease, what they could do to protect themselves as individuals and as a community. But the appearance of OutRage reflected other developments too. It was about this time that a commercial gay publication really became a viable project in Australia, partly because there was a market, a thriving market of gay men willing to buy this stuff. There were advertisers willing to advertise to them in order to sell their goods and services, and the technology meant that it was possible to produce a commercially viable, glossy publication really for the first time in the Australian gay movement's history. OutRage had its origins in an earlier publication, Gay Community News, GCN to its friends, which was established in 1979 at the 5th National Homosexual Conference in Melbourne. GCN was a very different project to OutRage. It was stridently political and saw itself as part of a broader left-wing movement for gay people and their solidarity with other oppressed peoples. It involved both women and men, and it was produced by a collective who did all of the work voluntarily themselves. The shift to a commercially based OutRage was a fraught process, and it's very visible in the content of OutRage compared to Gay Community News. OutRage was very much a lifestyle magazine. It was cruelly called by one critic a sort of Clio for gay men. It was very glossy in its presentation, but it addressed mostly issues to do with the body and the lifestyles, particularly of gay men, which increasingly became its focus. It included film reviews, theatre reviews, restaurant reviews, features on all sorts of aspects of gay male life, and was illustrated lavishly with pictures of men wearing not very many clothes at all, showing off their heavily gymmed bodies. At its peak, it was selling something like 11,000 copies a month nationwide, which was an extraordinary achievement. And in doing this, it shaped the political and cultural environment, not just of the gay world, but more broadly, as people read it for information, particularly around AIDS and other health issues. In the end, it was taken over by a public company, the Satellite Group, which crashed and burned in 2000, taking this iconic magazine down with it.
OutRage was such a great magazine for its age, but hey, things change, and as print media declined, so did OutRage.
And yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, now we've got all our online sites.
A whole new world. But that's it from myself and Tess for QTV this evening. Join us again next week for some more QTV.
Bye for now.
The